it's Jen back with Foundation Paper Piecing Series 4, this time for July. Of course, the American flag. We're an American company. And 250 years we're celebrating as a nation. We're a young nation, but haven't we done so much in the time we've been given? The first in so many things, and it's exciting to be able to embrace that heritage. Kits are the way to go. You're getting these incredible fabrics here. We put a lot of thought into the fabric choices. Of course, we have the amazing print with the words on it. I love that, to just kind of wrap up this beautiful small project that looks great on the table display. You could also use the 12-inch French curl. This is kind of that classic that works with all 12 months. If you've got a spot near your sewing machine, or maybe at a work office situation where maybe you want that displayed, maybe you don't want that on your table, great option for that. But let's talk about how does this work. Inside your pattern, some important things are included beyond the instructions. First, you're always getting full color instructions. That's so important, so that when you are getting your kit, or maybe you're just going to pick up the pattern, you're now saying, okay, I'm going to grab out my kit and I'm going to identify my fabrics clearly from the cream, blue 1, what's my blue 2, what's my red 1, what's my red 2, because there's very specific cuts associated with each one of those fabrics. So that's why you have a full color pattern. Or again, if you're going to be sewing from home, you're getting the gist of what you're looking for. You know, like you're looking for a cream like that, a blue kind of like those tones. You get the idea. So that's going to be the first step. And of course, our instructions are full color throughout your assembly. And then we're giving you some guidance into creating the hanging sleeve on the back if you do want to have that on the table stand, or maybe the French curl. And I've covered that in the very first video of this series, which was several months back now. So be sure to check that out if you want some assistance in how to do those steps. This is more of a refresher of how to do the process. But also inside that pattern is those most important foundation papers. This is the Carol Doak. We always use that. And as you can see in this particular project, we have section A, B, C, D, all the way up to section H in this one. And just like I recently had a chance to teach at a quilt retreat that had only 2 sections of the project, the top and the bottom, here we have more sections, but it doesn't really matter how many sections we have, because we're always just working with one section at a time. So that's going to be one of our first steps, is going to take our rotary cutter or scissors and we simply cut those sections apart until we just are working on section 8, for example. H, for example, I should say, H and F and G and D and all the various sections. You're like, okay, how do I know what fabrics go with that? This is where the instructions and the stickers, one of the most beloved part of our foundation paper piecing patterns, are these stickers. What does that mean? Let's look at the instruction and let's look at the stickers, because what we have found increases our satisfaction, joy, and accuracy in foundation paper piecing is being organized right from the beginning. Once you get your fabrics out of your kit, or you've selected them from your stash, and you've identified, okay, that's my cream 1, that's my blue 1, 2, red 1, 2, give your fabric some sizing, press everything out, change the blade in the rotary cutter if it's been a while, because now we're going to be making some cuts. We're going to make a cut and sticker. From cream, here we go. 1 2.5 by 14, and then we're going to subcut that into a 2.5 by 4.5 for B3. Look at that. My first sticker is B3. Look at what the next cut is. We're going to do 3 2.5 by 1.5 for A1, B1, and C1. Guess what? A1, B1, C1. The stickers sync with the cutting sequence inside that pattern. That is not a coincidence. That is a very carefully coordinated instruction along with the stickers, so that as you make that cut and you sticker until there's no more stickers left, right? They're all on the fabric. This is empty, and all your fabrics that you just cut have the stickers. Now gather up all your A's. gather up all your B pieces, all your C. So here with the H1 section, I will have all of my H fabrics I've stickered. They're not in any random order. I get them in order, H1 all the way through H7. And I put that over aside. And I gather up all my A pieces and all my A foundation and B and C until everything is organized. That is one of the most important steps about foundation paper piecing. Once you have that, we now begin, you're really almost done referring to the pattern for quite some time until later on when you start sewing some of these sections together. So I'm going to put these aside. We don't need any of that right now. And we're going to be working on our section H. Notice there's an H1 as well as on our other foundations, an A1, a B1, a C1. The very first piece of each section is going to have a little bit of glue. That's how we're going to be doing this. This is where we're going, okay? This is where we're going to go. We have fabric on one side, our foundations are on the back side. So the very first piece, which happens to be H1, we're going to attach the fabric to the back of this paper. I want you to remember back to back. Back of the paper where we cannot see our H1 to the back of that fabric. And you're like, well, how do I know where to be? This is why there's a light pad on the table with me, because whether you use a light pad, a sliding glass door, we need to be able to hold that up to some sort of light, which is great during the day, or a sliding glass door, which is great on a sunny day. But what about night when you want to quilt, right? You can't see that. This is why there's a light pad. Now let's take a look at this. Here's the goal. We want to make sure we cover all of the footprint of H1 plus 1/4 inch all the way around. Once we're sure we're able to do that and our fabric is in that position, and see how right now it's not, I'm going to move that. So all the way around here, all the way around the H1 shape, and this is the 1/4 inch around, by the way, right? All of this is just extra paper out here. I got to have that fabric reach all the way to that lightly drawn line. Once we have that, I'm going to put a little bit of glue right back there and just press down. Okay? Now we're not going to get very glue happy because this papers will be removed later on. This is the Sew Line glue pen. It comes with the refills and it dries clear and it's water soluble. I have made the mistake of using a purple glue pen, kids glue pen, and I found out that does not dry clear. And I happened to put that on the back of a white fabric. That was a bad idea. So this is why this is part of my go-to kit for foundation paper piecing. The next go-to item in my kit that is really the most important is the add 1/4 plus ruler. Now these come in a combination pack of yellow and or pink. You can buy the individual sizes 6 and 12, just get the 2-pack. For bigger projects that I know you're going to want to do that have longer angles that exceed the length of this, you're going to be looking for that larger add 1/4. Just grab that. I'll just use the yellow one today. And there's a tapered edge and there's a lip edge. We're going to be using both. Our goal right now is to fold back this paper on the tapered edge between H1 and H2. And then later on, the line between H2 and H3, and this line, and this line, and this line, and this line. So I'll place my add 1/4 to the left of my line, fold my paper back directly on the line, giving a nice firm crease. And I always look at that to say, did I get that right? Every now and again, I get it cattywampus. Fix that. Once you're like, oh yeah, you folded right on the line, Jen, that looks really good. Now, with the paper folded back, this is where the lip, look how it just locks in. Fabulous, okay? Now I trim. This is the beginning of a process called trim, sew, press, TSP. Think of teaspoon when we're baking, and that's a happy thought. TSP, trim, sew, press. But before I can sew, I need to add the next piece of fabric. If we were doing patchwork, we know we have one fabric right side up, the other fabric wrong side up, place them together and sew. It's not different with foundation paper piecing. It just happens to be a slightly different technique. Now this is H2, right side together. Now I need to audition to make sure that I have my fabric in the right place so that when I sew my 1/4 inch and flip it, it will be in the right location. How do we do that? I'm just going to place it here and going, I think I'm in the right spot, but here's how we do this. I place that and I kind of press down with my fingers and I flip that over, kind of simulating a 1/4 inch. Now let's look and let's check. I barely made it here. I don't like that. I'm going to scoot that this way. So when I flip it back over, I'm scooting it down here. So now when I flip it this way, I can see that. I'm going to give you another option, and I actually saw this at Quilt Retreat. Someone else who took my class said, well, couldn't you also just fold that paper that way and see that you made it? Yes, I find that a little bit more confusing. I was asked that question. I'm more comfortable with right side together, flipping it this way. And when I look, I can clearly see we absolutely made it. So what do we do now? All right, back on that back side. Hold that, make sure I've got that well in place. Pinch that together. And now from the front side, I'm just going to pin this so nothing moves. All right, I'm going to turn that off so we're not distracted by that. I'm going to be using a Microtech size 70 needle. This is a finer needle than we normally do patchwork with. This is a sharp needle. It absolutely perforates this paper so incredibly well. And I'm sewing on a shortened stitch length of a 1.5, considerably shorter than a 2.5, and we know why we're doing that. Not only to perforate the paper, right, to be able to remove it easier later, but we're also adding a lot more thread in a given distance, because instead of that stitch being a 2.5 millimeter, it's boop, 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 a lot more thread in a given distance. That's a good thing. So when we remove that paper, we're not removing our thread. We're not removing any stitches. I'm going to start right on here, off the edge, so directly on my line, and so straight off. So let me go do that right now. Okay, so trim, sew, and you know P is always usually an acronym, and sewing is press, right? So we just came back from a quilt retreat where we had 4 makers and a table and a shared iron. I saw a lot of people opting for the Clover roll and press because it does a great job and they're not waiting for an iron. However you want to do the P, whether that's with an iron or the Clover roll and press, go for that. And if you've got little ones, kiddos, where you're worried about them potentially burning themselves with an iron, the Clover roll and press is a great option because the iron is away, right? Whether I do it with the iron here or the Clover roll and press, the P is the press. Now we simply start again. Guess what? We've held on this one. We've sewn on that line, so here we go again. Add a 1/4, slightly left of the line, folding on the line, just like that. Turn it around. Okay. Now comes a cream. Let's see here. So fabric is, that's the pretty side, right side together. And I'm going to probably bias it this way. I think I might have learned my lesson. But we're going to check it. Okay, that made it. I have enough enough of a safety margin here, and we'll keep it right there. Again, I press it together. On this side, I pin. Once again, here to here. I think you're probably catching the rhythm of this. Super fun. And here we go with press. Or if you're like, no, I want a harder press, I'm not worried about any little ones running around, that is a great option. Okay, so once again, I'm going to turn that off. And we continue. So you're catching the rhythm that the trim sew press, right? Fold it back, trim. I'll do it one more time. And then I think I'll jump to the bottom of that because I want to put that bigger piece in there. And then I want to trim that up. And I'll also just briefly touch on what if you're not able to sew side to side. And I'll talk why I'm mentioning that, so that if this is a refresher course for you and it's been a while, I want to talk about some of the other sections where we're not just sewing side to side. We have to be more specific about where we're ending our sewing, and we're not just coming off both sides. Okay, here's our next fabric. Beautiful fabric. I love this texture of this. And I can already see with that fabric sticking out the edge. I don't even have to look at the light box with that one, that we've made it, right? And we understand that we're going to sew edge to edge. And we keep going all the way down. Before I put on the H7, and I've already done this in advance, I want to get to the H7 with you. Let's look at some other pieces. And I want to point these out to you. This is a great example. You can see here actually that A1 and A2, let's just start with that very first section you would do. We can't just go from here all the way and zip across the side. We've got this big old A3 here. In this instance, I would start a few stitches, just 1 or 2 stitches before this line. Start just before, sew on the line, and you can sew straight off, okay? So later on, you can go zip straight across. Let's look at this one. Same thing. We need to start a few stitches before, sew on the line and straight off. Here, you can come here. Same here, a few stitches before. So I wanted to point that out so you don't just go zipping straight across. You just have to be mindful of where you can sew and where to not sew. Okay, so I mentioned we're going to kind of just zoom ahead to that last piece, which is H7. And I can already see it looks like it's longer. So let's just pretend that I position this. Oh, I got to fold it back. Let me not skip my steps here. Let's fold this back just like we normally would. I'm going to do a better job of that. And trim. Sometimes my instinct is to have that longer edge here and flip it over. But you see how we're a little bit short of that? This is a longer piece if we kind of look at it, right? My instinct was to go here because I want to match up with this. But you can see, no, we need the length of that. So that's one of the things I would say that gets you into trouble is assuming that you know and you don't do a check before you sew, and then if you do that and you're in the wrong spot, you're now grabbing for the seam ripper. And seam ripping a 1.5 millimeter stitch length is not fun. You're also probably kind of tearing your paper. So please, please, please check. These light pads are a really fantastic price right now. Less expensive than the previous light boxes, which is incredible to me. All right, let me put this right here and let's audition that spot. That's a really good spot. I'm even going to move it over a little bit more. About right there. Yes. Okay. Put it right there. Flipping this over. So here to here, and then we're going to trim this up. All right, let's press that. Now this is what this looks like. Kind of goofy, right? My favorite part of doing foundation paper, I actually love it all. I actually love the whole thing. But one of my favorite parts about this is the precision of cutting it out. Now, notice how in these corners, these are just 90-degree corners for the most part, but look at this little jog. That is not an accident. That is not a printing error. That is so intentional. So that the first portion here and this next portion will click together like puzzle pieces, okay? So make sure you're just being very careful to cut those engineered corners carefully, because they are going to be your best friends when you're trying to sew these sections together. Now make sure when you complete the various sections, you're not removing any papers right now, because these markings are helping us to understand this side joins A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. It's letting you know what side goes to what, and this is stabilizing all of that fabric. It also is providing a 1/4-inch seam allowance the whole time. So I'm going to make sure everything is pressed and ready to go into one. We've got multiple sections here that were already sewn together, and our instruction is going to guide you into that. See how it's letting you know? So section A to B, then to C and D. So you don't have to guess. We're going to guide you through that inside that pattern. Okay, so we now know when we place this right side together, look how this clicks together. It fits perfectly, absolutely perfectly, because we perfectly cut it to the size of our templates. This is what people talk about, why they love foundation paper piecing, is precision. You cannot achieve, you could achieve a different block with patchwork, but you can't achieve this result with traditional patchwork cuts and techniques. This offers you a new avenue of projects, and what I'm looking at here was just they weren't stacking exactly on top of each other, so I'm fixing that. That's what I just looked at, and I could see that. It's very important the pieces stack right on top of each other. So when I look at that, I'm not seeing another piece peek through. Okay, here we go. Straight off the edge, and then I'm going to pick up that line right there. Okay, and I bet our pattern is probably going to guide me into pressing that seam open. Yep, right here. See the double arrow? That's letting me know that seam that we just sewed needs to be pressed open. So I'm going to grab my presser bar. This is a presser bar clapper combination from the Gypsy Quilter. Whenever I have a seam that I know is not going to want to open, look at our block. How beautiful is this? I first warm it up. I think my iron was cooling down while I was doing the piecing. Lay it over top of the presser bar and just start to get in there with my iron and get that pressed open, just like that. Now the paper in the seam allowance is also kind of working against me right now. So we often, especially when we're trying to get that seam allowance to press open, we go through and we remove that paper from that seam allowance. We know we're ultimately going to remove that paper anyway, but I will remove that now before I even attach my borders. Now, I don't remove any of the other paper yet, and I'll explain why. Okay, you get the idea. To go ahead and remove that paper to have less resistance so that seam can press open. Okay. All right. Have a trash can nearby, of course, as we start to remove some of the paper. So let's try that again. Now that seam is way, way, way more likely to go open for me. Paper's not working against me. See that? Huge difference. Then, once that seam is warm, down goes the clapper. That's why it's a great combination. Okay, what we like to do at this point, because remember, we still have that 1/4" seam. Don't remove the paper even now. We go ahead and cut that border fabric there. And you know, we were very kind of careful to have the words not being wonky. So I would say fussy cut that. You'll sew your side borders on first, and I'd put your strips here on this side, sewing here because you've got your 1/4" guide, right? On both sides, and then on the top, you'll have your whole top done. Now you can go ahead and remove those papers, right? We start removing the papers here, and ultimately, if you need to get in those corners like you saw me use them in those, be sure to use the Gypsy tweezers. Then we like to layer that with the Cali-Del. On the back will be your backing fabric in your kit or whatever you're using from home if you're doing your own fabrics. Remember to have your backing face side down. Cali-Del will be fused, that's a fusible fleece, will be fused to the back of this project. So you have your quilt sandwich. This is where we have the 3-piece thread set, and we're getting close here. We didn't stitch in the ditch, we stitched right on there so that it helps emboss this. Let it be seen, the beautiful red, white, and blue thread. And then we're off to getting that all quilted down. Trim off the excess backing and Cali-Del or fusible fleece. And then you're off to bind that. And then if you want to check out the hanging sleeve video again, we filmed that in the very beginning of the series if that's you. And you want to add the hanging sleeve, which is what is on the back of ours. Kits are the way to go, right? These fabrics here are a combination. I think there's 5 different fabric companies represented here. I choose whatever fabrics look the best together, right? This is one of the things that Shabby's known for. You're going to be so proud to display this year over year, but especially in 2026. So head to the Shabby Fabrics website to be sure to pick up the foundation paper piecing kit for July. Grab that thread set. Any notions you saw, like, yeah, that's a difference maker, I need that. And while you're there, we're seeing many of our customers are doing this. Once they catch the bug, they're going back and getting the other kits from Series 4. We're getting low in inventory, especially those first couple projects, as well as Series 1, 2, and 3. So again, head to the website to pick up your kits, and I look forward to seeing you next month as we continue Foundation Paper Piecing Series 4 for August.